All right. Hey, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be talking about difficult conversations, how to have crucial conversations in relationships, why it's important, when it's important to have them, and really how you can go about approaching these kind of make or break moments. I mean, they can feel like make or break moments in relationships where certain things are happening either internally with you or externally in your dating and relationship as it evolves, where your voice is necessary. You speaking up and naming what it is that you need, what you want, something that's occurring that you're noticing, it's important. So how do we approach this? With me today is Jack Butler. Jack Butler is a fellow coach, friend, colleague, and he's going to be joining me as we unpack this and dive deeper into this territory. Jack, thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Happy to be talking to you. Excited for this topic. Let's get into it.
So as we were talking offline about this, we had a couple different ideas of what we're going to go into, and I threw out there crucial conversations as a topic. I'd be curious to hear from you. Why is it that this topic is really important, and why do you think it's important for whether the coaching clients that you're working with or the people that follow your work? Why does this stuff matter?
I think because it's key to your ability to be authentic, right? Which you know is a theme that, well, you value as well. I certainly value in my work. I think the ability to be in these difficult conversations has a lot to do with the ability to be in a robust relationship with someone, whatever that relationship is. So I don't see this as just about dating or intimate relationship. I think this is also family, professional relationships, co-workers, business associates. Anytime really that you find yourself having a trigger, a crunchy place, and I don't know about you, but I'm going to say for me, some of the most crunchy places are with people. You know, it's not just the weather or business, it's like people. So I think this is important to connection, intimacy, fulfillment, nourishing what's most important to you. So I actually think it's at the heart of a lot of things. And obviously, and I know you'll be big on this, there's also a conversation happening within us all the time, always, already. So I think sometimes the skills that you can manifest externally, they also go, how sober and real and sweet and tender can you be in the conversation with yourself? So there's a lot at stake here, honestly.
Yeah, a lot at stake. I mean, it seems to me that this is fundamental to being able to approach relationship with human beings. That I would argue that if you are unable to have crucial conversations with the people that matter in your life, those relationships are going to be shallow, fragile, and oftentimes they won't last.
Yeah.
They're going to be filled with inauthenticity, and they will not be a place where I believe one can really find home in those relationships. And so, if you're relating to this, if you're hearing it and you find crucial conversations difficult, know that, this is difficult stuff. I mean, that's why we're calling it difficult conversations. Like bringing yourself and your authenticity, your truth, your needs, your emotions to a relationship is risky business. This is actually what I think makes relationships risky, is when we're bringing our actual full self to be seen by the other person. And an element of that is vulnerability, right? Maybe revealing some of the scars and some of our wounds to another person. But another part of vulnerability is actually being able to have these kind of conversations where we have a need, where we have a desire, where we have something that's been bothering us. And that's being vulnerable in relationships, is bringing this stuff to the surface to have someone bear witness to it. So anything to add on?
I'm going to say, well, my imagination is, for some people, the fear might be sort of being seen, right? Being seen fully for what is true. I'm going to imagine that for a decent amount of people listening, that part of the fear is also going to be that the other person isn't going to be able to be with it, or is in some way going to disconnect, shame, or shut down, be triggered by the conversation. And that's actually what people are fearing, right? The sort of the right to claim what's true without someone else trying to disavow that or disconnect in some way.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So what I hear you speaking to in some ways is like, what are some of the things that might be just internally stopping us from stepping in and having these kind of conversations? And I think those are all very valid perspectives. And we may have grown up in a household too, where that very much the case, where
Yep.
we feel invalidated, where we feel possibly abandoned for being our true self, being loved
Yeah.
only when we're showing up a certain way, like perfect or good or following orders or not having needs. And so then suddenly we get into these relationships where we're with adults later on in life, and we don't have a lot of the necessary skills to be able to suddenly navigate adult relationships without that younger version of ourselves really having all the warning bells going off that we're going to be abandoned, annihilated, left for dead, dominated, right? So this is some real stuff that we're talking about here. And if you can relate to any of it, know that you're not alone. And these crucial conversations, I don't think are something that we necessarily are born with, or it's inherent. It's not natural. It's something that we learn as a function of living in a family, but that's perhaps healthy, or we learn it through, I think, having good people in our life that teach us.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't imagine there's many people that emerge from childhood feeling very skilled at crucial conversations.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Whether that's the family system, the cultural imprint, the educational imprint,
right,
even just the limitations of your own Enneagram type, right? Which we could say you, in some ways, you come in with that. You didn't probably choose it unless you get super metaphysical in your view of that. So, nothing really set you up for this. I mean, certainly, right? Speaking as a Brit, right? The British culture is not going to go straight to the crucial conversation.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a direct culture like that. So there's a lot of communication that happens, behind people's backs or not directly to the person. So in the immediate conversation, someone might just shut up and live with something, but then afterwards they're going to complain about it to someone else. So in a way, what we're talking about is how to build a more authentic culture where it's actually more okay to say what's true between us. But there are big social costs to that. And there are also evolutionary reasons why we haven't said what's true. I mean, if you go back, ultimately, if you're going to say what's true, but you're going to have to die for it, right? Because the king or whoever is like, yeah, well, don't like that, chop his head off, so to speak. I mean, the risks are literally evolutionarily that high. Speak your truth, you might die, you might get left by the group, you might be imprisoned, you might be all sorts of things. Right. That's not that long ago, right? And still, even now, people talk about, well, speak truth to power, as if the system doesn't really want you to say what's true. That's not the highest value in the culture necessarily. And beyond that, now in the culture wars, what we see is, well, we can't even agree very easily on what's true. You might say, well, what's true for you, Jack, and I might say what's true for you, Clayton. But at least half of the world doesn't really think that's even a valid perspective. Like Clayton doesn't have a truth. There's the truth, but there's not Clayton's truth. So we're walking in some interesting waters anytime we wade into this sort of territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's complicated. And I think that's what I'm, just underscoring from hearing you speak there, is that there's a lot of different influences that are here from family, from culture, from society, that aren't necessarily rewarding us when we speak the truth. And so that if you have an issue revealing what's on the inside, it's rightfully so. It's a survival mechanism. So let's not shame it. Let's not think there's something wrong with us. Let's actually understand that we're living in an ecosystem where this is, in some ways, having crucial conversations is popping your head out a bit. And when you pop your head out, there could be an opportunity for it to get cut off, whether it's by your intimate partner, whether it's by culture, people, friends. And so this does take courage. And we're not talking about this stuff today as if it's easy, right? We're going to try to simplify it.
That's why we're talking about it, because it's not.
Exactly. Yeah. But we're going to want to give you a vehicle, first, some compassion and some acceptance of where you're at, and then also pointing in a direction that could also help build more robust, resilient relationships.
Yeah, that's good.
So, as we go into this, let's just talk for a moment. What are the consequences of avoiding these crucial conversations in intimate partnerships? Let's just start there for a moment.
Yeah.
So when someone's continually letting go of having the conversation that they feel that they need to have with the person, what happens as a byproduct?
Some of the things you might notice, one, you might notice that you feel like a smaller version of yourself. So you're gradually getting less expressed, you're having less voice, and perhaps your needs are less present in the space. You might have the experience of walking on eggshells or something that is along the spectrum to that, right? That you're being sort of extra careful because you don't want to say something that's gonna, provoke or cause an argument. So you might have the experience that you are anxious and preoccupied in a sense, even if that's not your attachment style, that you're feeling anxious and preoccupied because there's a thing that you know is sort of there, but you can't necessarily talk to it. You might notice that there are just domains of experience that become kind of close to you, right? That I can even think back experiences of this where if there's a difficult situation that keeps happening within a certain context, let's say with someone's family, or let's say when you're out at the club, or when you're at the restaurant, or with a certain social group, you may find that if you can't have the real conversation about that actually you just stop going to some of those things, or you're much less enthusiastic about engaging in some of those things. So there could be a kind of a sort of a limiting of the world in the sense that you can move in, or that you can move in the context of this relationship. I mean, for me, certainly, I know that if I'm holding on to something that's true for me that I'm not speaking, I'm likely to feel tense. I'm likely to feel it in my stomach. I'm going to get contracted. And maybe you're not going to have the experience of being able to fully sort of relax with someone because there's something kind of up between the space.
It's a really difficult place to be.
Say again?
It's a really difficult place to be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. A
few things that I'm just throwing the pot here too is you create a hotbed for resentment in the relationship, where if you're not speaking your needs, you might suddenly slip into this kind of mind reading paradigm where you're expecting your partner to operate by the same value system as you. And you start to project that the reason maybe that they're not doing something for you or being attentive to a certain need, want, desire, noticing the impact that they're having is because they're doing it maliciously. Right. And so you kind of, rather than sitting in the place of confusion, which can oftentimes lead to curiosity, it's almost like the confusion goes to a place of like, now I'm assuming malintent. And then who you start to be in the relationship is one where you get closed off, you feel less safe, you feel more emotionally distant, you start to create disconnection in the relationship, which can lead to a lack of trust, which can lead to a compromised sense of commitment in the relationship, and an increased likelihood of the relationship actually failing. And so, this really does have a domino effect if we avoid these crucial conversations. I think these crucial conversations are doorways to another level of intimacy, and we have a choice about whether we walk through them or not. And if we choose to not walk through them, in some ways, it might actually be us taking a path down to the end of the relationship.
Yeah, so I've got a question for you, kind of imagining someone hearing that. I'm imagining that there are people who have made some effort in this territory, but it basically hasn't gone well for whatever reason. And so it's not that they've never tried. It's a bit like anything in personal growth. Most people have tried something, right? But it hasn't necessarily worked. And therefore it's like, I don't go to the gym because I tried that last year and I didn't lose weight, or I tried to have this conversation and he ended up withdrawing and didn't want to talk to me. And then I got stonewalled for the rest of the evening. And so I like the idea of this conversation, but sort of how do you make sure you have it well? And does it take like two people? Because the territory you were in was sort of the territory of like revealing your needs, right? And if you don't reveal your needs, you could go down this route of resentment and lowering trust, and totally get that. And that alone can just be hard. But what do you do if you feel like you've gone to speak your needs, but it doesn't land, or it gets dismissed, or even worse than that, it kind of like kicks up into an argument and a fight. So now not only do you not get your needs met, but now you're experiencing more rupture in the now and in the connection. So I'm imagining that's the territory that some people are in. Certainly know what that feels like.
Absolutely. Well, I think that also just adds to that puts another weight in the bucket of why not to have them in the first place, right? Is because maybe you've tried and it didn't work. And I think there's a presupposition in NLP that I think is really important, and one that applies to this. And it's that the meaning of the communication is the response that you get. And so what this does is it actually invites someone who is communicating to take radical responsibility for how they're communicating. And so what I would get curious about is And I've had this happen in my own relationship. I've had this happen with friends, and it is to really look at, if I am just not as a place of like, this is the truth, but from a place of inquiry and experimentation.
Yes.
How is it that I'm creating being stonewalled? How is it that I'm creating and contributing to the rupture that I'm not wanting to experience? And so it might be that as I really sit down and feel into that question, I notice that maybe there's a way in which I'm presenting something where I'm dysregulated, or there's a way in which I'm presenting something where I'm blaming the person and not taking any responsibility for my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's a way in which I'm presenting something, but the timing is horrible, and I'm presenting it and I'm not calibrated to my partner when they're actually feeling resourced versus when it might be resourced. Maybe I'm not creating the proper context. Maybe I'm not providing the proper container. Perhaps there's a third party that needs to be involved, like a therapist or a coach, in some of these conversations. And so, I think that with anything, when we're trying to achieve a certain result, we're going to run into failure, and we're going to run into things that don't work from time to time. And can we get back on the horse, experiment again with a different method, and be conscious enough and aware enough of perhaps how we're showing up, so that we can begin to shift and tweak the way that we're communicating, so that we can come from a very clean, balanced, integrated place where we're assuming the best in the other person as we're communicating. And we can dive into that a little bit later, or we can dive into that now, but I'm curious just how that lands for you hearing that.
Yeah.
And then two, I'd love to turn your question back on you, and how would you handle it with somebody who is perhaps getting defensive and maybe is triggered by you revealing your authenticity? How would you coach somebody through that?
Yeah. So the way that what you're landing occurs to me is kind of like it's right. Like I am resonating with it.
Yeah.
And then sort of next to that, the other piece that comes up to me is, for me is, and it can be really hard, because in a way, what I'm hearing is, someone might have a thing that's up for them, right? Feeling resentment, feeling triggered. So we're trying to practice bringing that to another person when perhaps historically we wouldn't. But now we've got to try and bring it to them, but also from this place of like being as clean as possible and as integrated as possible.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's almost a bit like if you're in the gym, I'm asking you to lift a heavy weight, but I also want you to do it with really correct form. And right now you have neither form nor the strength.
Lower the weight.
So you might have to lower the weight, right? So when I coach with people, I often say, if you can, practice this stuff not just in the highest, intensity stakes place. So maybe not with, mom or partner or wherever you're most inflamed about this, but practice it in the smaller places. Practice it with the friend that's maybe not super close, or practice it when you're in Starbucks and the barista gets your order wrong and you're actually upset, and you're going to learn how to talk about that.
Love that.
So I think you're right, lower the weight, but sometimes that's also taking a bit of a longer view, right? Like I want to develop this capacity over a period of time, and it might take a while. No one would expect to kind of go in the gym and become like a power lifter next month, right? That might be like a multi-year thing. And then the challenge is, if the house is on fire, right? Like I'm in a big rupture, with a family member or a partner, that might not be able to just wait for like 3 years, for me to kind of integrate the capacity to do this more cleanly.
Exactly.
So I think you're right. I'm just wondering if there's anything in there that you notice, or we can co-create between us, of sort of the person who's like, yes, you're right. And how do I do that now? In a way that's sort of cutting me some slack, cutting the other person some slack, but is a good way of proceeding.
Yeah. So the place that I would point to in this is consciously coming from a belief system that actually supports some of those things that you're talking about, which are like generosity, appreciation.
Yeah.
And, I think that if we're coming into a crucial conversation and we're coming at it from a standpoint of, I'm going to have this crucial conversation because I want to be right, or I want to have this conversation because I want to get what's mine, right? What I deserve finally, right? I need the respect, or I need this thing, or this person really needs to hear me and they need to apologize. If that's the reason, the why behind I'm having the crucial conversation, that is going to create an adversarial dynamic, an undercurrent of opposition that will affect and infiltrate any of the techniques, no matter how good they are, and perhaps have your nervous system feel inflamed and naturally create some sort of a threat in that person's eyes. And so what I would encourage people to get clear on, and curious what you think about this, is begin to look at a set of beliefs that one could operate from, or a set of new truths that one could operate from, that actually clear the way to have these kind of conversations. So I'll give you an example. One of them might be something like, other people can learn and grow when given the opportunity. It's a truth that I'm going to embody. Everyone has feelings and needs that are important to them. Open communication can lead to better understanding and collaboration, right? If I hold that as true, and I really look for evidence of that existing, that actually through this conflict and through this revealing, that we could actually end up in a better spot than we've ever been in our entire relationship. There's a vision then that I'm embodying in my being, that I'm bringing to the dialogue, that I'm then communicating through with these techniques, right? So in some ways, the techniques become a way to fight for the health of the relationship. That ends up being a contribution to both people, rather than these techniques being used as a way to assert dominance or to avoid responsibility or to try to get the other person to admit that they're wrong, or for you to feel like you're right, which I think a lot of times are the undercurrents. People learn this stuff and they're like, this is a way for me to, maybe get my needs met now in relationship. And I think that on one level, yes, but on a higher level, it's actually a way to be a visionary of your relationship and create a new domain of functioning that benefits both people. And if you hold that in mind, I think we become a little bit more enabled to deal with the inevitable defensiveness that might happen with a partner when we're giving them feedback. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's right. I think it's almost the way it occurred to me, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people here will know that as well. So it's almost strikes me that you're fairly decently up the pyramid. And so the way it occurs to me is that if someone's in deficit needs, like they're super triggered, dysregulated, never had their needs met or rarely get their needs met, what you're saying might not just be available, and there might be another thing that they need to do, like maybe just take some space, or like call a friend, or, do something. But that if there is a sufficient level of resourcing where people can embody some of these perspectives.
Great point.
Right? Because typically when you're triggered, to then be in the perspective of, well, this is for the health of the relationship, that I might not have that available. I might need to like deal with the trigger and learn how to. So it almost strikes me that I don't know if this is quite the right metaphor, but like you're given some pretty high level kind of nutrition advice.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of looking over here and it's like, let's say I'm the client, but right now I'm like eating like burgers all day long. Right. And so it's sort of like, oh yeah, like taking some more echinacea might help, but really like we need to stop this burger thing like pretty soon, which probably for most people in relationship is some version of like super triggered, high conflict, maybe reproducing some pattern that I always learn how to do, like a very dominant defense style, right? Either I come on strong, or I withdraw, or I shame, or whatever the thing is. And I think one of the things that can be tricky, and certainly know this from my experience in an intimate relationship, is that you may be bringing some stuff up that you're not used to having it brought up in other places. So it could be the same. It could be, well, if you're honest, you undervoice in your relationship and you also sort of undervoice at work. But it might be that the thing that's being brought up is so close to what was happening in childhood that it hasn't fully been activated in quite the same way in other domains. So it's sort of, there's a bit of a uniqueness sometimes to that territory of, I didn't quite realize I couldn't, lift in this environment, whereas I'm sort of used to being able to lift, so to speak, to use a gym metaphor, in other environments. So yeah, that's what comes up for me. But I love everything you're saying. I love the vision of it, and it seems wise. it seems resourced and wise. That's how it occurs to me.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm also hearing, your I think a attunement to the kind of gradation, or is it gradation? Yeah, of just like what would be like the next step for somebody, like if they really are been eating burgers for their whole life, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like what what you would say to that. Is there, what kind of step could you see as maybe uh like what would, if we were to take that metaphor over, what would be stopping eating burgers look like? I'll throw something in the pot here that came up while you were speaking,
Yeah.
which was actually just practicing a technique of like active listening. So
Yes.
rather than going for the full reveal, maybe begin to practice really being present with what the other person's needs are and what the other person's actually saying, but not from a place of like reaction, like I'm just unconsciously paying attention to the other person's needs, but actually consciously acknowledging them. Active listening, reflective listening, someone's speaking to you and you're reflecting back to them what you're hearing. I think these begin to lay the foundation and one of the things I believe in relationship is that if there's something we're wanting in relationship, how can we bring it first? How can we bring it as an offering? And so if you start to model what active listening is, reflective listening in your relationship, there's a high chance that over time, your partner will naturally begin to learn how to adjust and possibly listen to you in a similar way as well, because you're bringing that as a contribution, as a flavor to the relationship. And in an intimate partnership, I feel like we sometimes have no choice but to take on the different ways that people are listening and speaking to us. So that could be a low threshold to beginning to bring more consciousness into your communication, into the listening, practicing a skill that may then naturally make speaking what it is that you have a problem with or your need feel like less of a leap over a chasm. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yes. To, active listening, and reflective listening. And I do think there's some truth that, if the more someone feels heard, possibly the more they might be able to hear you. I'm curious. One of the things that came up for me was I was just sort of imagining from, you and I have been in this space for a bit. So, some of the things I hear quite often from people is like, but he's a narcissist, right? So I'm just sort of imagining someone listening to this and being like, wait a minute. So I already don't feel that heard. I don't get my needs met. Now I have to show up to do the active listening for Mr. Narcissist so that maybe one day he might learn to listen better, right? Like I can notice the skepticism in me just sort of hearing that. So I'm naming that because I think we're bringing, these sort of partial truths, right, to the table, and maybe some empowered frames and perspectives. We're not saying this is the truth. We're saying these are some things that you can try on, experiment with, see how they work for you. And sometimes the hardest territory for this is it's almost like getting over the hump with something. Do you know what I mean? Like getting going. Like if you already have good nutrition and you go to the gym, right, and then you want to like add some other like stretching routine in, that is much easier, I think, than if you're the person who has none of that foundation and none of those routines. So I guess what I'm also saying is people they might be listening and wondering, at what point do I say, actually, this isn't a place I want to continue to relate or date, because it's showing me my wound, right? I'm not being heard, but there's some objectivity there. Like maybe I'm not being heard. Yeah. And how long do I kind of stay flexible to sort of find a way that I can feel more heard? Like, is it possible in some connections I can't even heal the thing I need to heal because it actually isn't going to be available? It's just going to keep aggravating the wound, right? So in this instance, let's say there is a narcissist and someone's more of an empath. At what point do they say, actually, yes, the learning as the empath is I need to stop dating narcissists, rather than trying to practice a technique or, do you know what I mean, do a thing? So in a way, the crucial conversation is that there's also a question in the background. Do I want to continue to date and relate here? Yeah. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. And I think that I'm of the opinion that the word narcissist is overused. I think it's trendy. Call everybody that is self-interested a narcissist, but if you actually look at like the DSM, it's I think 1 to 2% of the population, and so it might be like, well, how do you deal with selfish people, right? Versus putting the label of narcissist on somebody, which really does at that point, it's kind of like the pressing the nuke button on the relationship, where it's like, well, he's a narcissist, so like that he's responsible for all of the toxicity and everything that's happening in the relationship. And so I would be just
distinguishing clinical narcissism perhaps from other flavors of it that you're calling selfish, let's say.
Right.
Yeah, and be wary of the label.
I think it can be a way that we maybe actually further disempower ourselves by calling someone else a narcissist. And that's my concern about that. It's suddenly now I'm victim to a narcissist. And not saying that there are not people that are victims to narcissists. That absolutely does occur, right? And there are narcissists out there. I do think that what we're talking about is then if we're talking about this narcissist piece, that they are in fact that, we're talking about a very narrow example here, which I'll talk to that. Something that came up to me is that this idea of whether to stay or go in the conversation, there's two pieces here. One is maybe the active listening is not the tool, is not the next step. Maybe it's something like just practicing saying no. Yeah. Right? It's as simple as that. It's actually just really putting your own needs first for a moment and practicing saying no to other people in your life, maybe before you're saying no to the narcissist, and just getting some reps in there. And then the other thing is that I think is kind of paradoxical about this is, sometimes we almost need to have those crucial conversations in order to get clarity to walk away. Right? Where it's like, we need to bring something to the table. We need to bring our actual truth to the table and see whether or not that person can respond or does respond the way we think they're going to. I've worked with clients in the past where they're convinced that if they brought this up to their partner, they brought this up to an employee, somebody they were working with, that everything would blow up, right? And then what happens is maybe they check out of that relationship, and it could be prematurely because they actually haven't uncovered that stone. They actually haven't done what maybe is on their side of the fence, which is to bring the thing to the table to actually see how the person really responds. So I would say I think there's many instances where people I think it's important to develop these skills so that they can be the thing that clarify whether or not that is your person or not. That a crucial conversation doesn't always have to be a contribution to making the relationship work. It could be a contribution to seeing if the relationship is actually workable.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's an empowered perspective to be in. Yeah, seems right to me.
Do you have any place where you want to go with this? I'm
liking the conversation. I realize, we've covered quite a bit of different territory, but it's resonating with me that there is lots of territory here. And
I appreciate your attention to the nuance and some of these places where it's like we're not leaving anybody behind in this, right? Where maybe this is really, really important. We're kind of building a stairway rather than a leap. And I appreciate the attention. So thank you for bringing it.
Yeah. Well, it's a different metaphor, but I used to, at high school, I could run races, and quite often I'd win them, at school level, nothing super crazy, right? And then I remember having a time where I was much less fit. And running the races was just so much harder, being the guy at the back than the guy at the front, right? Even though when you're at the front, you're kind of out of breath and you're working hard and you tell yourself it's hard. It's not as hard. That was my experience. So if someone's listened to this and it's like, they're constantly having frustration in dating, right? Or they, not just in this connection, but a series of connections or relationships, they've sort of had the same issue, right? The good news is, maybe you're the common denominator and maybe there is therefore something you can do about it, right? The bad news is you've probably already tried really hard at this and maybe it's felt intractable. So, I just kind of have an awareness of if something is a bit more easily remedied, and it might be that just one of the techniques that Clayton's talking about is actually it kind of is the golden key for you, right? Sometimes you don't need everything; you just need that kind of one or two things that really integrate in you and that work for you. But I guess I want to encourage people to keep at this, because I think whether you're dating or not, or you're in a relationship or not, this stuff is all around you all the time. And the more you can clean up in the way that Clayton's talking about on your side of the fence, which I'm still in the work of, I'm sure Clayton's in the work of in some ways, we all are, in a way, the more connection and intimacy you can have, right? Whether you're dating or not. So I think it's in service of something kind of cool, which is understanding ourselves and each other more, right? Removing the barriers to deeper connection and intimacy. To use landmark language that you might be familiar with, like not running rackets on other people, so not having kind of stories that you continue to perpetuate about other people that foster resentment and withdraw us from other people. So the heart of this is a real heartfelt thing. It's like, I want to connect with people. I want to feel connected. I want to feel closer to them. I want to have less friction in relating. It's just sometimes, the practice and the pathway can be difficult in my experience and holding clients in this kind of territory. So sometimes it just takes that kind of longer view persistence of like, kind of stick in there, keep practicing this, because the more you practice, even if it's not that it works with this particular person, the direction of travel, I think, will be good.
Yeah. And I think, as you're alluding to, in many ways, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? It's actually, it's a practice. It's a practice more so than it is a technique. Right. And I think that's
that's well said. Yeah.
We get to practice this. And the thing is too, is I would love to just, if it's not already clear, is I think allowing for messiness is really important. Allow it to be messy, allow it to be not perfect, and welcome perhaps some of the ruptures that may occur as being authentic expressions of something reorganizing in the relationship. I look at some of the fights that I get into with my partner, and, granted, look, I do this probably just as much as anybody, but it's where something doesn't come out completely straight. It's like getting to a place of feeling integrated, calm, and centered to the best of my ability, and I still might be freaking angry. Right. And then how it comes out, it might not come out just like pure water. It might have a little bit of vitriol in there. And, and same with my partner. And one of the things that I would love is, I know that I'm not always going to show up with my best foot forward when I'm speaking. And when we can exercise generosity towards our partner and listen to the request behind what may occur as a demand. I think it is really important. And that's one of the practices that I've continually try to do, which can be really difficult, is if I start to feel attacked, it's to listen to the pain behind the attack, to listen to the truth. Like, I might not agree with the way something is being said to me, but if I get caught up there, I can be a pit bull and I can argue all day and say, I'm not going to take the feedback until it comes the way that I need it to come. And it's like, and I've done that at lesser moments. And I think it can be a real humbling experience to just listen to the request and the pain underneath all of it and see what is your partner's heart trying to communicate versus their mind. Right. And even thinking myself, when I'm trying to communicate to somebody and I'm in my head about it and my ego wants to be right or wrong, or I'm feeling attacked or diminished or unseen, it's like, well, what is going on how can I communicate from my heart as cleanly as possible? And God, this stuff, I don't think it's supposed to be perfect. I think it is kind of like an ideal that we kind of point to, but it's almost maybe it's almost like a rainbow in some ways, where it's like you can see it, but the closer you move to it, the more you realize that there is no perfect here, right? Because you're not. I think we're making a bargain with people when we decide to enter into a crucial conversation, that we're letting go of control. When I don't have a crucial conversation with somebody, what I'm opting for is having control, because I have control over myself, and I kind of have control over how they might, react, because I haven't upset the system yet. But when I decide to have a crucial conversation, I'm surrendering control inside the system. Yeah. And so the more, I think, adept we can get at that, I mean, I hopefully that continues to build anti-fragility and resilience in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm curious if you are ever making a discernment, it's talking the sort of the full flavor of relationships, connections you have, about the sort of capacity on the other side of the fence. Like, is there a time where discernment sort of says, I wasn't super psyched at the way that was said, or the that I don't know, was included, wasn't included, punctuality, whatever the thing is. but actually, you know what? Like, I don't really sense that we're going to get to a better place. Because my imagination is that in family systems, people are making these sorts of assessments quite a lot, right? Like, okay, we're going to dinner with, the cousins, the in-laws, the whoever's, and I know that Donald Trump's going to get brought up, and do I want to take it on or do I not, or these sorts of assessments, because there is a value on truth, right? And I think you're bringing that flavor a lot into this conversation, right? Naming your truth, claiming your needs, whilst also promoting active listening. And then there maybe is a side of the harmony, right? And the good thing about harmony is sometimes that we are willing to let something go, if we can let it go, and just sort of say, yeah, like I don't necessarily agree 100% with what was just said, but I don't actually need to get into it with this person right now. And perhaps if you've had experience where we've sort of gone there and it didn't really get us anywhere, like I think humans are quite adept at particularly any of us that are more intuitive, to kind of, and just based on experience, to know, yeah, everyone's probably got a bit of a bandwidth of what sort of conversations are available for, right? Like I've known you for a pretty decent time. We've worked together. We've been friends. I know there's a lot of stuff that you're available for that a lot of other people aren't available for, right? So that's a different context. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious how you think about that, because the one size fits all would sort of be the almost like the sledgehammer of truth, right? Like I just tell everyone my truth and they can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
But actually that's almost invulnerable, because it doesn't honor the nuance and the distance and the calibration, and there's a social intelligence sometimes, but you don't necessarily go to the Queen of England and just tell her your truth. I mean, the late Queen of England. So what do you got, Clayton? Give it to me.
I think in every circumstance, we should always be naming our truth.
That's it. No, I know I'm just ordering a latte right now, but there is a truth I need to share with you, sir, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, man, I mean, I think that discerning when and how to kind of pick and choose your battles is really important.
Interesting. That's a metaphor.
Yeah. And I think the family is a really great example, and I also think too, are we looking, when we reveal our truth, are we looking to change somebody with that truth, or are we trying to put them more in contact with us?
That's a good discernment. Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes when we think we're revealing our truth, we're really just trying to change the other person's mind or change the person, versus put them in contact with us. And I think that if our intention behind the reveal of truth is to put someone more in contact with us, then we might do it more often, right? It might not even occur as picking and choosing our battles. It might occur as something completely different. Look, I know there's family systems where, hey, it's actually really healthy to keep somebody at arm's length.
Right.
To not be completely revealed about what's going on with you, because you're right. They might not have the capacity and be boundaried enough to allow you to have your own experience without them taking it personally.
Yeah.
If I'm coaching clients and I'm working with them and they've got, say, somebody who might have BPD in the family, but they love them. It's like, are we trying to change that person? And how much are you revealing? How much are you talking about your relationship to them and how your inner territory? It just might not be safe to do that. It might be that the real love inside of that structure is learning how to know what to share and what not to share, so that you can keep your balance in that relationship. And I think that's what you're talking to some degree. And I think I think there's a level of discernment and kind of looking at what is the greatest contribution to the relationship right now? Is it arguing with them over politics? Right? It might not be, even though that's your truth. It might be that your truth is actually, your truth about your political affiliation, and it's actually not a contribution to the relationship that you have right now with this person. And maybe it's a good time to table it.
Yeah, I hear that. So there is a kind of discernment here. I guess maybe there's almost a presupposition that I sometimes have, like, not everyone needs all your truth all the time, right? That there are other things that you're in service of. So in a way, you use that word contact. I've maybe used the word connection. I think they're broadly in the same sort of territory, right? Like you might have a value on connection and a value on truth. And part of being an integral or more integrated human being is actually that you can pick and choose a little bit, right? Like, right now, what is needed is perhaps some space. That's actually what we're valuing. We're not trying to get to the truth here. We're actually just trying to give space for everyone's experience. Or I'm really valuing connection. And sometimes you might learn how to value connection more than the truth, right? Like maybe that's okay. And maybe for some people, it's actually in the other direction. The direction of development is, no, I'm pretty good at staying harmonious and connected. And actually, I need to learn how to individuate and differentiate more and claim a bit more of my truth around certain people, or more of the time. So I guess maybe we're giving space that this doesn't have to look a kind of a one right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. And really kind of subjectively looking at like, what is someone in such a development? If you've been labeled as an asshole, or you're someone who identifies as, someone who just like, is like, hey, it's my truth. They can take it or leave it. Leaning more into this edge of learning to create harmony, like Jack's talking about, might actually be the most beneficial path to go down for a little while to balance things out. Yeah. I get it. Well, listen, man, we are at the top of the hour, and there's also so much more that we could talk about, and maybe we just pop a part 2 at some point.
Sure. That's rich.
Yeah, but I think an hour has been good. I'm feeling pretty full from this conversation. I really appreciate the different perspectives that you brought to the table. I think they're super important and probably echo a lot of the voices that some of the people in the audience might have. And
I hope so.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot today.
Yeah. It's good, man. Thanks for having me on. It's good being with you.
If
Look forward to seeing what feedback you get.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and if you've enjoyed Jack's perspective or just enjoyed Jack's energy all the way around, just go ahead and subscribe to his channel. His link to his YouTube channel is in the description. Jack is I think you're a bit of a thought leader in the realm of authenticity, being yourself, creating in your life. Wide knowledge base and a lot of depth. So check him out. He's got some great content on his channel, and subscribe to this channel as well if you'd like more content like this. And leave a comment below if you got any questions or anything that you want Jack and I to follow up on. All right. Thanks for watching.
Right on. Thanks, everyone.